My Hero Academia. Chapter 424 is here. Deku still has the embers of One for All, but what does that mean? Also, it appears that the ending is not as close as we thought. Sit back, relax as we go through the chapter and explain everything. The title of the chapter is Epilogue, which means a section at the end that serves as a conclusion to the story, and this confirms that the war is over, and we are seeing the final chapters of the series. However, I would like to cover something most people missed in the spoilers video. In the chapter's note, Horikoshi says, "Writing conventions say that the conclusion of a story should be short, but this is not the type of manga that can immediately end after the fighting is done, so I'll keep going for a little while." We're going back to the title. This means that the ending is not as close as we expected and we're going back to the academy. And I really like the fact that we'll get a proper ending to every character, and I can't wait to see what happens to Deku and One for All, and I'll explain why later in this video. The chapter begins a few days after the battle. In the United States, Meryl is doing the weather forecast and she says that the whole country is being blessed with clear skies. She also adds that this week was a bit chaotic, full of ups and downs, and at the end, she recommends people be careful when doing the laundry since the wind is still pretty strong. The wind was generated by Deku's punch and was what ended the war. This gives a clear context to the strength of Deku's final punch. A week has passed and the after effects of Deku's punch haven't settled yet. Next, we transition to the rebuilding process. Salam and Cementos are working together. The children are happily surprised by the speed and progress of the reconstruction. After the war, many heroes worldwide arrived and are helping with the reconstruction. We see Big Red Dot giving an interview, a hero using his quirk to project the layout of a building, and Setsuna helping a pro hero. Koichi is also here. We see him flying, and I wish that we saw more than one simple panel of him flying. Considering that he is the main character of the spin-off series, I was hoping to see him in a scene with the other heroes. Anyways, a reporter says that if this reconstruction was taking place before the appearance of quirks, it would have taken over 10 years. But with all these quirks combined, we can be sure that everything will rebuild in no time. However, to be fair, if it weren't for quirks, we wouldn't have this damage in the first place. And I think this means by the end of this chapter, the reconstructions will be complete, and you'll understand why later. Next, we transition to the hospital and the doctor speaks to Bakugo and his parents. He is telling Bakugo that his arm won't go back to how it was. The surgery helped, but it won't get better than this. The doctor says that even after rehab, he is not sure if Bakugo's hand will ever move, and he proposes that if Bakugo wants to continue being a hero, the best thing to do is to use prosthetics like Mirko's. And we discover that Mirko didn't even consider rehab, she directly chose prosthetic limbs. However, we see Katsuki's parents very sad as any parent would in this situation, and Bakugo refuses this proposition because his quirk comes from the palm of his hand. Besides, Deku didn't have any quirk to begin with. He says that he'll work hard in rehab, but the doctor tells him to avoid any heavy training because he's more worried about Bakugo's heart. The doctor explains that if it weren't for Edgeshot who stitched Bakugo's heart and performed CPR, he would have died. The doctor is surprised at how he managed to keep fighting, and for now, Bakugo needs to focus on resting. Next, we transition to another hospital room. Deku is surprised that he is sharing the same room with All Might, and All Might said that this must be Tsukochi's doing because it's easier to guard and there are only so many rooms available too. Deku then asks about All Might's body. All Might says that the doctor has never seen so many bolts, and he then asks about Midoriya's, to which Deku says that he is starting to feel his arm. After that, Deku regretfully says, "In the end, I couldn't save Tenko's life. Even after I reached my hand and his hatred was gone, Tenko continued to be the leader of the League of Villains until the end." All Might asks, how was Shigaraki's face at the final moment? And Deku thinks about their final interaction just before Shigaraki's death, where Deku tells him that he destroyed the only thing that needed to be destroyed. All Might says, "If what you saw wasn't a crying boy, then I think his heart was saved after all. Just like One for All's big mission. You passed it on to him, right? It must have reached him. This essentially finished off the story of Shigaraki, and I honestly don't know how to feel about this. I know Shigaraki deserved to die, however, I was hoping to get a scene where Deku and Nana are talking to Tenko after he figures out that All For One orchestrated everything from the start. I mean, we get Tenko's reaction when All For One tells him the truth and takes over his body, but I was hoping to see Deku and Nana pull Tenko up and save him. Anyway, now we get to the important part of the chapter. Deku responds to All Might by saying that yes, he passed One For All, but he can still feel some of the embers inside of him. At the same moment, Bakugo opens the door, and he is completely shocked to hear that Deku will eventually be quirkless, and here I would like to note a mistake. In the spoiler video, it's mentioned that Deku still has his quirk. However, in the chapter, Deku only has the embers and he'll eventually lose his powers, similar to when All Might passed One For All at the start of the series to Midoriya. Returning to the chapter, Deku smiles and says, "Yeah, but I was born without a quirk to begin with, so I'm not really sad. I transferred it on my own will. I'm actually pretty happy I got to live this dream." And at the same time, Bakugo is reflecting on their past. He remembers them as children holding the All Might cards and several other moments like the bullying and their second fight. Bakugo then starts crying and Deku can't believe his eyes. Bakugo reflects on how he has been treating Deku and he says, "I just thought that we would keep competing and stuff for a while somehow." And in my opinion, this perfectly completes Bakugo's character development. Horikoshi did an amazing job with this character. Especially if you rewatch the previous seasons back to back, you would understand and see Bakugo's growth. Next, All Might says, "You got stronger, both of you. You've changed a lot since the day I met you. Young Midoriya, that day when you ran off, you became my greatest hero. But now you're the one who makes people stand up again. That means you're the greatest hero to everyone else too. And young Bakugo, it's thanks to you that I got the opportunity to tell you both all of this. You are also the greatest hero. Thank you so much." On the next page, the narrator Deku says, "When I was a kid, I thought peace came back immediately after the war was over. But our story won't end just yet until we get to our bright future we've been fighting for. We'll go beyond." The last page shows Deku with the other Class 1A students in school uniforms walking towards UA. The chapter ends here and no break next week. As I said at the start of this video, Horikoshi will take his time to properly end the series and he is taking us back to the academy. And now that we see Deku going back to the academy, I wonder what will be his power. Will Horikoshi find a way to just give One For All back? Or maybe he'll be using a suit similar to the one All Might used in his fight against One For All. Hopefully we get our answer in the next chapter.